back. This is really the last session of the evening. And it's great that you guys have still energy and ECC is still not finished. And ETH Global is still beginning. the week will be long. Let's start with a quick round of intro. And I will basically say that Ahmed, now I'm a little bit like frustrated because this guy has the 4337 Mafia t-shirt and we don't.
Still in the trademark, yeah.
Trademarked.
We have some like reserve for you guys, don't worry.
Cool, yeah, please feel free to intro yourself.
Hey everyone, my name's Ahmed. I apparently stole their trademark. Yeah, anyways, my name's Ahmed. I've been in the crypto space for the past 6 years, co-founder of Bioconomy. Everything we do really is all about how we could simplify UX and Web3.
Awesome. Hey, I'm Christoph. I'm the founder of Pimlico, and we are building infrastructure for the next generation of smart accounts. Specifically, we already have live our bundlers and paymaster services.
I'm Yoav Weiss, Ethereum Foundation, and a co-author of 4337.
My name is Dror Tirosh. I'm also a co-author of the ERC 4337.
Hey, I'm Mirko. You probably saw me at the entrance. I'm a developer for MetaMask. I also do a lot of community and education stuff around account abstraction.
Cool. So I will start. We are very honored to have the three co-authors here for 4337. And especially on that, since you guys also like really spoke a lot, you are really advocate around this standardization. Like, do you see, and this is all about trends, do you see this ecosystem flourishing, both for like end users and developer tooling?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite...
Oh yeah. No, like how is this ecosystem? You think like we have companies building on AA, do you see this ecosystem flourishing from since you guys basically like co-authored the paper?
Yeah, it seems that the ecosystem is definitely growing. You see all of these great companies around us that are building great stuff. So we're continuing to work on the standard and seeing the rest of the ecosystem building around it. So yeah, it's been great.
I mean, a big part of why we started Pimlico is because we saw that so many wallets were starting to build on the standard, and that so many saw the benefits that this ERC gives, right? But they all were encountering very similar problems, right? The lack of this underlying infrastructure that 4337 requires for the wallets to work.
Yeah, I think if you look back when Yoav, I think it was in Denver, that he announced officially the ERC 4337, etc. Since then, it's been crazy, the amount of activity. You see it on Twitter, the amount of startups in the space that have started to build like super cool stuff. So yeah, super exciting time, definitely.
Definitely exciting time. So, and going back to a little bit like trends and misconception, like what are the things that you wish people will know more around account abstraction? Both like Pimlico, Bioconomy. You guys are rocking with the SDK, by the way.
I mean, account abstraction is not just social logins. I would say one thing is that it's all about, I would say, like really the problem statement and the use case is really, it's just very important because everyone thinks it's, a silver bullet. And ultimately, like what we're seeing when we're working with different companies in the space, and even when it's like interacting and seeing their user journey and sort of solution engineering, like how they want the user flow to look like, it's really, really important to really specifically understand the problem statement and that sort of custom user journey that you want to give to your user in order to sort of like have a great experience. Because it will, differ so much. Like today alone, I've heard of like 3 or 4 different use cases, and ultimately, this would be sort of new front ends or new services that would cater to these use cases and flows. So, yeah, I would say like let's not just think it's a silver bullet and really just understand the problem and understand the use case.
Actually, what I'm thinking right now, there's a lot of buzz around 4337 account abstraction, but it is a developer tool. we will know when it gain adoption and people are using it, we will stop hearing about 4.37. It will become a standard. It will become the boring underlying infrastructure that wallets are built on top. We are not there yet, of course.
So we are not there. You touched on standardization. Do we have also enough like standardization around our ecosystem, and do we have enough like developer tooling?
There's not enough developer tooling. They're working on it. We started with the infrastructure, with the account abstraction interface, which means the framework doesn't care how an account is built, which is great for the framework, but now we started, the community started the effort of how a concrete account is built on top of this abstract framework, like a modular account. And it will take time. Right now, wallets are not modular. There's no market of modules yet. This is the vision where it will get. So it will take time. Nice. Actually, it advanced much faster than I thought it would.
Much faster? Awesome. But how are we getting there? How we accelerate this adoption?
So developer tooling is still lacking. I think it's a major obstacle. When you want to just get started as a wallet developer, you want to get started, the amount of boilerplate stuff that you have to go through before starting to develop is still much more than in other projects in this space. So I think having native support in developer tooling is going to help a lot. This is something that I hope the community will work on. Then we'll probably see a lot more projects. Another thing is standardization on top of what 4.37 does, because 4.37 standardizes how validation works in order to have an account abstraction mempool. But beyond that, things like standardizing modular accounts, standardizing what execution looks like so that dApps can start getting more benefits beyond just things like batching, start improving their UX. This will also increase adoption.
I think it's super cool. Sorry, Ahmed. Super cool what's happening with the 6900 and all this kind of new technology happening around 4337. Obviously, a lot of cool stuff on the kind of SDK infrastructure level. Biconomy has a great SDK. Yeah, so I'm seeing like a lot of cool stuff lately.
Yeah, I would add as well to the dev tooling piece. So it's dev tooling, it's the developer experience and use cases. I feel like we can at times really be like buried deep within sort of the tech and things like that. But ultimately, at least again, when we're speaking to projects, it's about how is this going to, deliver and serve, to our bottom line? How will it actually improve, user experiences? How will it really engage and bring this sort of new wave of users as well? And so it's more like, I feel like we should really be thinking from the lens of, these current applications, because for them, they are thinking, okay, how can I increase my users? But also another challenge also that we need to solve is how do we go from the current, the current applications have a lot of users who are native like to EOAs, right? How will they introduce a smart account flow? This, becomes important. Like it becomes harder because then, from a product standpoint, you have to think about two flows when it comes to logging in and doing transactions. And so, this stuff is hard as well, especially for existing, blue chips that really want to, like blue chip companies or blue chip protocols or dApps that want to, of course, integrate this. Otherwise, we'd have to wait for all the new applications that are building AA natively for them to grow big. So I feel like there's that challenge as well.
I feel like these underlying infrastructure tools, like bundles, have improved a lot over the past couple of months. There's a lot to build still with paymasters, but I think a big thing that we need, and thank you for people like Biconomy for building this stuff, is like the actual smart contract account system that people end up using, because that is one of the most difficult things in the stack to get right. And because you're actually writing contract code, you have to go through all these rounds of audits. And so that's a really big barrier still for many smart contract account providers to build.
And I just want to like say like a really big like it's funny when you guys were writing the ERC and everything. I remember looking at it like early last year. It's great. Like when I look back just a year, like you said, it went quicker than expected. And I think that's just it's literally because of the community. And if it wasn't really for the community, you know, who really pushed this forward, it wouldn't have got to at least this trend that we're seeing. So it encourages, you know, you guys to come, more people to build. So we'll eventually get there. Like that between the hype and the actual adoption, we want to close that gap ideally.
It's actually super cool because everybody is like speaking about, you know, community feedback and acceleration through community. For everybody that doesn't know me, like I'm a big fan around like permissionless innovation and getting those feedbacks quickly from your developers. And I want to touch a little bit on Snaps, obviously, that you know, enabling this like permissional innovation wave where really you empower those developers in the community, actually like extending what MetaMask or what your wallet will do in the future. Like, what are the latest account abstraction use case that you saw, Mirko, around like, you know, hackathon or ecosystem events that you're quite interested in?
Yeah, obviously you mentioned Snaps, which I guess Alex spoke a lot about it in the previous panel. So what we want to do at MetaMask is kind of create this platform for people to build on top of our product and really leverage all these cool technologies like account abstraction and what else is out there. I've seen some cool stuff around the gaming space, Nefty, OpenFort. I think I saw the two founders around here. They really have a cool SDK. There is some, so I don't know if he's the founder, but there is some cool stuff around analytics that I've seen, so not strictly related to account abstraction per se, but more like what's happening around the entire ecosystem. And I think that's what we are kind of missing in a way, which is like a good analytics and metrics, especially around bundlers, user op, etc.
Yeah, definitely big shout out. I think like 2 days ago, Matrix came out with the AA dashboard. I think that's super useful. And yeah, I don't know, you have anything to add around the analytics or like metrics? Do you have anything to add around like, you know, analytics or metrics or anything like, you know, for understanding like how we are doing in terms of like account abstraction adoption?
I haven't been following the latest metrics. Actually, we are more busy with research, so we're not always keeping track. But we do see that, and when we do look at them, we are always amazed at how fast it's picking up.
I would say for the people interested, there's been some people who've been doing amazing work when it comes to analytics on 457. I think probably my favorite one, which I mentioned, is a Dune dashboard by Kofi. Yeah, he's made an excellent dashboard where he can really go into detail about the different things that are happening with user operations with 457, what changes are happening on, who's deploying them, you know, all these things. And, you know, we're going to be seeing if, you know, looking at our own internal data at Pimlico, what sort of trends we can make out, what sort of patterns do we see that we can focus in on.
I think, yeah, especially on adding to Christoph around bundlers, you probably want to kind of have an idea to run a feasible business. You want to kind of an idea how much like are you making your revenue, etc. I think, yeah, Alchemy came out with a nice dashboard as well recently. So yeah, there's some stuff happening around there as well.
Cool. So if you guys have any question, please shout. I think like we are not on time, but we have still some time also to get this question interaction. Yeah. So I mean, around trends, like you mentioned a bit, like you guys are full on research. So what are the things that you're looking right now or the next 6 months on the research side?
Yeah. So one thing is native account abstraction. It's something that it's the natural next step, and it's already it's already happening on some ZK rollups, as you know. So so people are working on native account abstraction, but it's currently creating fragmentation because it's not being native in a standard way. So one thing is to propose a native way that different, so that layer 2s that want to migrate from the ERC to a more optimized native version will be able to do it in a uniform way.
Which rollups did you say are doing it natively?
No, I mean currently you have it on ZK Sync, for example.
I mean are there other ones other than ZK Sync and Starkware?
No, so right now they don't, but there is, others do have plans or are looking into it, and we are working on. So we're working on standardizing it. So that would be one thing that should happen in the next few months.
Yeah, I'd say for us when it comes to sort of like research for the next 6 months. I mean, there are like certain things that like, ideally adoption is always front and center, but in terms of like what we like to explore is things around like intents, how intents could also be a part of the account abstraction sort of infrastructure. Again, this has been like, you know, a very sort of hot topic as well, but it's just at least understanding, you know, what could the role of the bundler be in this domain? Will it sort of, you know, become a solver? How would it interact? I think, and especially like just understanding how would like this sort of intent-centric architecture that's sort of coming out, what would the benefits of account abstraction provide over the EOA sort of intent architecture as well? So I think that's just like not building, just researching to see like what could happen.
Yeah. So yeah, intents is something that I've also been researching. It's actually a much harder problem than, I mean, you can use account abstraction as a stepping stone, but you need a lot more than just account abstraction, and actually solving intent in a way that is still aligned with the community values of censorship resistance and decentralization is actually really hard, and I've yet to see a design that handles it correctly. So I'm not sure, it will be a bit long to get into all of the problems that this research has to cover, but it's beyond just taking the intent and implementing it. There's a lot of, I mean, creating a decentralized intent market is an interesting problem to think about. So that's, yeah, it will be interesting to see what designs come out in the next few months. And there's also the research about, so there's also the ongoing research around the modularization, which I think is going to make a big impact on the space with the ERC 6900 and having modules that specialize on certain things and that can be used safely across different account implementations, and then having a safe way to install them, knowing what permissions they have, so that you can actually trust them and you know what they could or could, what is your exposure to this model. It can create an entirely new marketplace with account integrations, basically creating a Lego of account where you can assemble the perfect account for your needs. So I think we're going to be seeing a lot of research around that. I'm involved in some of it, but I'm sure that there is a lot more going on.
I'm curious to hear from you guys. What do you think is going to happen in like 5-10 years? Are we going to look back at the EOA as this kind of legacy technology that no one wants to touch anymore, or will it still be around in some sort of form?
You're saying if that many years, my hope is that the answer is simply yes. We're going to look back at it, and hopefully no one will be using EOA, because hopefully there will not even be EOA, it will be an emulation. I'm hoping that at the network level at that point we'll have, all the accounts will have code, and if you want the default behavior to be like EOA for legacy reasons, this could be, you could start from that implementation and then switch away from it as soon as your needs change. So this is, I mean, if you're talking like 10 years, then yes, I hope we'll get there. Not, but within a year, definitely not. Within 10 years, I really hope that yes.
Cool, cool. I actually don't have many more questions around trends. And yeah, I just want to say, no, it's super interesting also to see like the ecosystem flourishing. Like if you think about this, what since the last Denver, things changed so much. So many other like new ecosystem players are just adding more and more tooling. From the developer, on the developer side, do we have enough like tooling to actually like you know, to have and continue giving like those developers to build on those sides? Do we have actually enough, or we have more barriers to solve?
Yeah, I mean, just to add like one anecdote, sort of, I was speaking to someone and they were like, right now, you know, developers are essentially like right now in Web3, everyone is used to WAGMI, Ethers, web, you know, and Web3 as well, Web3.js. And so, you know, the idea is that for developers to also add something else like account abstraction could be a bit too much. And so, I didn't really sort of like think of it from that lens in terms of how can we just really make that like even easier for users. And of course, we are seeing more open source initiatives like user.js out there in the market. But ideally, developers should just come in and have account abstraction just there for like just to use very easily, right? And then of course, I think there's a lot is already happening around the paymaster side, the bundler side. Given the work Pimlico are doing and others as well. So yeah, I just feel like that developer education resources, like we're expecting developers to know account abstraction. I think that's the problem.
I'm quite optimistic that over time, you know, as we get even more adoption, these libraries you mentioned, like, you know, Web3.js, Ethers, VM or WAGMI, they'll sort of see the light in a way and actually adopt it natively inside their own libraries, right? Like they've done with many previous standards, right? Like, you know, signed type data and all these things.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it gets adopted like soon, right? Ideally.
Yes.
Cool. Do we have any question from the audience? Oh, there on the back. Let's bring some mic. Oh yeah, please shout out the question.
Sorry? Can you?
Okay. so recently there was, some would call it a debate, but some would probably call it a conversation, where there was a group who wanted to move ERC-437 back to the protocol level. There was a discussion about it, and you were involved in this conversation. You put your reasons why it should be kept at the application level. So I don't know if you just want to just give us like a summarized version of why you want to keep it at the application level, because there was a big push on why it should be. The group is still going strong and advocating to push it back to the protocol level.
No, it makes sense to have it as an ERC at the application level, because this way you can have it on every EVM chain, like, available immediately, and you have it on more than 20 EVM networks right now, actually working there. Being an ERC also allows us to experiment and modify the model and tweak things until we get to something that is really satisfactory. But then at the same time, you want to have an optimized version on chain. Now, you don't want it to be the only one, because then some chains will support it, some won't, some will support it at a different time. So you get fragmentation again. But if you have an ERC that anyone can implement, and then you can have an EIP that is compatible, so that you have a new transaction type that just adds this functionality at the consensus level. It becomes now more gas efficient, so you get certain benefits, but you don't have to do a lot of work to migrate. Then it makes sense to have a way, a standardized way, to move from ERC to EAP on chains that are ready for it. And I don't think it will happen at the same time on every network, but if a network does decide to enshrine some form of account abstraction, then at least it should be standardized. It should at least work the same way across different chains and not require changes for each wallet.
I think a potentially interesting movement that's happening with this is, I believe, led by my friend Ansgar from the Ethereum Foundation, where they're ideating what it would look like if instead of the EVM being, canonically driven by L1, there was like an L2 EVM consensus, right? And we didn't have to wait for Ethereum mainnet core developers to sort of come to the agreement, right? That could allow us to move a lot faster with potential native integrations.
Hey, I found it really exciting that you were talking about identity, authentication, authorization through ERC 4337, and I wonder if you were to wish for or think of a utility using decentralized identity, and what would it be in our future? Maybe it's through applying it through an application, or just forming our unique identities in. This could be a question for everyone, sorry.
Identity is an application. It's a great application that I think account abstraction can help implementing it, because you have a code to implement it. I don't know much about it, so I can't. Yes, I think account abstraction is a great platform to experiment with such a project. Would like to see it working with a WorldCoin or other identity mechanism. But again, for us as a framework, it's a use case. It's a great use case. But okay, go ahead. Great idea.
Yeah. Just to add very quickly here. So I believe eventually, the identity and account abstraction are just gonna be naturally tied together over time, because people will have their smart accounts, and that would probably be their de facto identity, or maybe pseudo identity at some point. We have some identity experts in the room. I hope you guys could weigh in, but we're actually going to do sort of a hackathon on sort of identity and account abstraction in the next month or so. And I'm not sure if I could share, but I'm just saying there will be something in the next month or so. But yeah, I definitely think, at least in the time being, it gives a great way for people to experiment how identity and AA could come together. Because of course you could attach, a particular ENS or a lens profile, or even an NFT, or however way you'd want it to happen, right? It's just what will the standard that will emerge to come to showcase this identity is going to be, it's going to be a difficult question to answer, really. It's up to the market and how we adopt it at the end of the day.
Another question? 1, 2? Well, no, this guy right here. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe the question for the entire panel here, but just sort of 4337 has been sort of adopted into the sort of entire protocol, and it seems like the traction so far has not been sort of, I think it's just limited to say so far, right? So I was curious to hear your thoughts on what's the gating factor for wider adoption. Maybe the former panel has talked about the gas fee, but curious to hear your thoughts on maybe what other factors are the gating factor, and what do you wish to solve for the most?
You mean what we want to solve for most at Bioconomy, just to clarify, or? Sorry.
Yeah, just at your individual institutions, or in general as a community. What is the limiting factor or the gating factor for the wider adoption of 4337?
Okay, got it. So I would definitely say, like, in terms of at least the limiting factors, I think like we said, a big, like, I believe education is just one big aspect. Another aspect, I mean, I love to see a raise of hands who actually uses smart accounts or smart contract wallets here.
You don't?
No. I mean, yeah, I'm just, of course I do. But okay, other than a safe, who uses it? Okay, so it's slightly less. Okay, I think ultimately, if we do believe in this, we should like dog food, right? Like what we're building and actually use this stuff. And so I would say, like, you know, again, the community push is great on the intellectual sort of curiosity, building great stuff. I think using the stuff and actually, like, you know, being you know, real adopters, right, would help. And ultimately, I think for us, at least the way we see it is, if we don't get real adoption of smart accounts soon, that will be very problematic, because if you don't get smart accounts deployed and end users using those, then like what's the where are those like there will be no transactions essentially. They'll still go through the EOA flow, right? And so increasing that would eventually help, of course. You know, it will naturally be a spiral effect, but we need to increase the adoption of smart accounts.
So how you want to increase this adoption? Like with what?
Use cases and solving real problems. And that's what we're really focused on, and yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Sergey, so thank you for your panel. I had a question, but before, just one comment. You mentioned, Ahmed, you mentioned about the safe. I think the beauty of the safe and why it's mostly popular, because it's purely fitted. It really has a good documentation. It has a good interface, which is ready to use. I mean, we will be able to spread this technology into other use cases and other ways how we can use account abstraction. It can be more popular. And the question is, we, with the company, we're trying to bring traditional finance into the blockchain level, and especially the payment system. And when you think about banking account, which looks actually like can be like account abstraction, there is a possibility to go to the credit, I mean to minus. Do we able, for example, to sometimes to get the same functionality on the account abstraction level?
Sorry, could you repeat the last bit of the question? I didn't really
yeah, so when you have your card, for example, you can pay, you can over-limit your debit account, and you go to minus. Bank can deal with you on the agreement level that you own money to the bank. But if we think about the blockchain level, on the layer 1, it's impossible to go in minus. But if we will be able to bring this possibility to blockchain using different types of instruments like account abstraction, that will give you more flexibility to work with existing use cases, especially in payments. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I got it now. Thanks for that. So 100%. I think that's why, you know, this push towards you know, the standard and account abstraction in general is because you could enable, you know, these use cases that we're very familiar with, right? To applications like banking and finance. We're working with One Wallet actually, where like one of the biggest feature requests, you know, and actually things that they want to really build is essentially having spending limits, you know, in their wallet, right? Spending limits is great, and you know, we're actually going to be sort of like, you know, supporting hooks and sort of enabling spending limits through that as well. And of course, these are sort of like clear use cases that would, you know, that end users will you know, be familiar with. Another one, of course, is just simple things like dollar cost averaging. Like, I would love to have a decentralized way of like DCAing into ETH, right? You know, and that is, you know, very doable with what we're doing. So all of these use cases, and that's the thing, right? Like when I think about sort of everything where, like, just in general, the community is doing and where we're sort of going towards, we're literally doing so much just to meet the standards of what the world is used to right now, right? But why is this important? Of course, we always have to remember that these use cases and the technology that it's built on will always be far superior than sort of the current, things that we have in place, which are centralized, siloed, and censored, really. So yeah.
Hey, thanks for the panel over here. This is Joan. It's the first. We're building OpenFort, the first gaming smart account SDK. So I got a question. I would love your takes on what are the dynamics what's going to happen with private mempools, public mempools. How are you seeing the current, let's say, dynamics, and how are you seeing this evolving with the merge of native account abstraction, let's say the merge of user operation with transactions, etc. Thanks.
So the mempool behaves effectively the same way. It's not, the same validation rules, the same transactions will get propagated the same way. So the dynamics of the account abstraction mempool are based on 1559. So it has the same dynamics. Only the validation works differently. But afterwards, the fee payment works the same way, so it's the same fee market, the same incentives. And initially, it's going to be a mempool of user operations. But then, even if at some point it becomes a mempool of account abstraction transactions, meaning just a different transaction type, a different Ethereum transaction type, the mempool is going to work the same way. The structure of the transaction doesn't really change that. So I'm not sure if that answers your question because I couldn't hear quite well, but does that answer your question?
Hi, since we're on the question of trends in account abstraction, do you see in the next 5 years hardware wallets going out of fashion and your phone becoming the de facto hardware wallet? And if yes, then what would it actually take? Like devices like Trezor and Ledger actually going out and being your phone becoming your hardware wallet because like EOAs are going to go away, hopefully.
I think account abstraction and a hardware wallet work really well together. It's when I use a smart account, I often want to have different rules for different kinds of transactions. So maybe for transactions up to a certain size or with contracts that I regularly interact with, I'm okay with transacting without bringing my hardware wallet. But for some transactions, I'm going to require the hardware wallet. So I want the account to have a policy for that. And so I don't think hardware wallets are going anywhere. They're actually going to become more useful. They're going to become more useful, but there are going to be policies for how the policies within the account for how and when they are getting used.
I just want to say that see you guys so engaged and asking so many questions, especially at this time, is incredible cool to see. And I'm extremely happy that, that everybody's is so engaged and feel for the topic. So thanks again for coming, everybody. But keeps the question coming.
Hello. Oh. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, panelists, for being here and answering our questions. My question is around the systemic risks for account abstraction. So I wanted to understand from anyone of your perspective, from a 4337 perspective, we've introduced a new mempool, we have bundler services, we have paymasters. Are there any systemic risks for attack vectors? For example, MEV. Can transactions be censored, and how can that be solved?
Right. So, in terms of systemic risk, the biggest one, of course, would be a bug in entry point, because we introduced this singleton called entry point, which becomes a part of the trust base for every account that uses it. So this would be a catastrophic failure. This would be the biggest systemic risk, and that's why we spend a lot of effort in auditing it, in verifying it, making sure that that it is safe. And with that, it's essentially a part of the consensus. So having a bug in this would be equivalent to having a consensus bug in Ethereum. And at some point it will become a part of a consensus. So it's the same kind of systemic risk. As for other things such as MEV, I don't see why it's different. It's, I mean, you already have MEV, MEV around the mempool. So in the account abstraction mempool, you're going to have very similar MEV. Just because the validation works differently doesn't change the fundamentals. And I expect that bundlers will make money with a combination of getting fees and extracting MEV, just like builders do. Over time, I expect that every builder out there, so it doesn't have to happen at once, but over time, I expect that most builders will integrate with bundlers. So, because the most profitable block is going to be one that takes transactions from, that takes both transactions and user operations in order to extract the most value out of the next block. So there's no systemic risk here that didn't exist without it. And similarly with Paymaster, no, these are components that you can use or not use. It's up to you. So there's no systemic risk around that. But of course, if there is a very popular account implementation and you have a bug in this implementation, then it does get to the level of systemic risk. Just like today we have, if you look at the amount of TVL in SAFE, regardless of 437, if there was a critical bug in SAFE today, it would be a systemic risk to the ecosystem, in my opinion, because it's just big enough that it would be considered such. So similarly, other accounts would, a very popular account could become a systemic risk.
I'll ask a question. And this guy, every time I see these guys, ask them 1 gazillion question. So I have one today as well. Well, what role do you think privacy can play in account abstraction? Obviously, privacy in a blockchain system is not fully achievable, most likely. But what do you think around that? And have you seen any use case on it?
So personally, for me, privacy is one of the biggest use cases we need to be thinking about. It's an account abstraction makes it possible because of gas abstraction. I mean, account abstraction in itself doesn't solve privacy, but it's required in order to solve privacy, because as long as you need to fund your account with ETH, it means that you are doxing every new account that you're using. So it's once you have gas abstraction, you can have privacy models. At the basic level, you could have, for example, a mixer where you can have a mixer where now the withdrawals pay for the account creation, so you don't need to. So you can start from a fresh account, make a withdrawal, and the account works and is funded immediately. Where a paymaster that works with the mixer can get paid as part of the withdrawal, and that's why it agrees to do it. And it all happens autonomously with an unowned contract. So, and instead of having relays, every bundler or every block builder out there is participating in helping you achieve this privacy. Now, beyond the mixers, you can have multi-tenant accounts. Then multi-tenant accounts where multiple users can keep assets and use zero-knowledge proofs to prove ownership when they transact. So you can have, so you can group together a group of users in the same wallet. Or you can have privacy rollups. If you are using protocols like Aztec, using privacy layer 2s, you can now withdraw from them. You can withdraw to a fresh address, also without having to dox yourself. And this is just a non-conclusive list. I'm sure that we're going to see many privacy solutions built on top of that.
I believe if you're actually looking for some practical implementations of privacy that involves 447, there's quite a few smart accounts who already started. like ideating on that and building on that. Two projects that come to mind are ZK Shield and Nocturne. So definitely worth checking them out.
Cool. Any other question, or should we go home? Cool. Last question there.
So I've previously tried Smart accounts on L2s, and it seems to be pretty easy to use. But on Ethereum, when I tried, I had to spend 20 or 30 bucks to deploy a Smart account. So I guess my question is like, what are some developments aiming to reduce this cost on Ethereum? And what kind of timeline do you guys see this happening to make it more viable?
I think this is a very common question that we get at Pimlico, and sort of our typical response is that we really don't expect the future of 4437 to be on layer 1 mainnet Ethereum. The gas cost overhead that you suffer from having to actually execute the validation step of your transaction on chain really does make a big dent. And so that's why we've seen almost all activity happening on L2, and I think that's going to stay the same way.
And that's going to be for Ethereum in general, not just, I mean, regardless of account abstraction, I don't think in 5 years we're going to see much user traffic on Ethereum layer 1. It just doesn't make sense. They're going to have to compete with rollups on Blockspace.
Yeah, and just to add very quickly, I mean, I would say if there is one use case, it would just be for enterprises, right? If they want to enable this on Ethereum because it's secure, like $23 isn't much, right, for the average enterprise if it's 1 or 2 accounts, right? It doesn't really matter. But of course, as the panelists have said, like everything is shifting to L2s up by economy. All the traction we've seen is just naturally on these cheaper chains.
I saw someone like that was not agreeing with this statement. You guys want to say something about it, or let's put some spicy question there?
Spicy.
The last spicy question of the evening.
We work with institutional investors, and the majority of none of our institutional investors will use layer 2s. None of them. They will not put their capital there. There's security risks, but the primary risk they have is with most of the layer 2s, you have this very long cycle where the money is stagnant between the time that they want to withdraw it from a layer 2 and bring it back to the Ethereum chain. Until that can be solved, most institutional investors, or at least every single one that I've talked to, wants to stay on the Ethereum layer 1 for that primary reason. So there's some primary things that need to be considered if you want to attract more TVL to layer 2s. And it is a chicken and egg factor, right? How do you get more TVLs to layer 2 if there's not TVL there to attract them? So that was my reaction. Is I would love to see more adoption of layer 2s, but I'm just seeing all the big institutions wanting to stay on layer 1.
I don't think there is a contradiction here. We are saying that account abstraction, yes, it is a bit more expensive, and this is why we see the adoption will be with the faster layer 2s, faster to adopt new changes, because it costs more on layer 1s. And you are talking about institutions which move large amount of money. They care much less about gas prices. Yes. And this is the beauty of 4337. It is deployed today. It will be compatible, because this is the way we build it, to be compatible between ERC based on whatever networks it is, maybe more time on layer 1, and the enshrined version on version 2s. So there is a cross between them, regardless whether layer 1 will eventually, we do hope they will, but even if not, it will be compatible and work across at the cost of a little more gas just to so the transaction, and I think it satisfies all worlds. And if the price will become sufficient, maybe it will be enough to push the core devs of L1 to include this within a few years, the enshrined version also to layer 1. But regardless, it will be useful. It will be functional.
Yeah, I think the issue of gas cost is of course, it's a trade-off that that you have to make. So as an institutional, maybe your trade-off is different. And maybe you want the security of a smart account, which can be much better than the security of an EOA, of course. But and you are willing to pay $20 per transaction because you're transacting with $10 million, then of course be on layer 1. I think that over the years it's going to become more and more expensive, so it will push a lot of the TVL to layer 2. As for the withdrawal delay that you mentioned, this is very specific to optimistic rollups, because optimistic rollups need to have a fraud window, a time for the fraud proof to happen. That's because they're optimistic. But with ZK rollups, you don't have that issue. It actually becomes, so finality happens much faster. It's only, and it's up to the proving time. So I think that the withdrawal time is not going to be an issue as the ecosystem moves towards ZK EVM solutions. And then it just becomes an issue of gas price, which again, for institutionals, maybe they'll want to stay on L1 a little longer than others. But I would be very surprised if they still don't migrate. As the L2 ecosystem matures, I would be very surprised if 10 years from now, institutionals are still going to trade on layer 1, because layer 2s are going to be mature, they're going to have a lot of mileage, and on the other hand, the layer 2s are going to take a lot of the capacity of layer 1, so it will become more and more expensive.
Makes sense. And I'll just add one other use case to consider with the layer 2s, forensic accounting. So we work with an accounting firm that audits large financial entities. And so doing forensic accounting with layer 2s is very, very challenging, because you need 3 sources to prove where the transaction comes from when you're doing any type of financial roll-up. So we have the ability with layer 1, we can drill things down and say, okay, here is the transactions that make up this value. Here you can see them on Etherscan, and you can manually compute them if you want to. But when you start getting into layer 2s and you start having to pull transactions and some that you can't even get the history from, it gets very, very messy. So again, the institutions want to stay away from that particular possibility of having an audit where they can't prove the numbers are accurate, because that could lead to big problems. And especially like in areas of Dubai, which now has taxations and DIFC that went effective June 1st. So there needs to be certified or audited accounting of DeFi. And that's really, really challenging. It's something that we're tackling. So
I would just add to this. I mean, Ethereum is the #1 chain, right? And because of that, you have so much dev tooling, resources, mindshare. So people will solve these like nitty-gritty things you're talking about. Right now in L2s, everyone and like their dog is like launching an L2, right? At least what we've seen in the past 2 months or so. Let's assume one of these L2s, I don't need to name, becomes an Ethereum. Like, we'll see the same mindshare and dev resources because of that natural network effect. So I wouldn't be too fussed, honestly. It's just a wait and see game maybe for them. But we've seen a ton of institutions last year deploying Polygon or otherwise. So I wouldn't say it's a big deal. It's funny. When I spoke to the regulator, MAS, Monetary Authority Singapore, and I was like, why was Project Guardian on Polygon? Do you know what the response was? It's greener. I didn't know if that was like really the reason why they did it, but apparently that it was that. And so it's just one of those things where we have to wait and see. Like, you can have all the same dev tooling. It's just a matter of who's going to build it.
Now, another thing regarding you need forensic accounting. So remember that not all L2s are created equal. So if, for example, you decide that you stick to L2s that have their data availability on Ethereum, which becomes also easier with danksharding, then you know that even if the layer 2 goes away, let's say they turn it off before the end of the year, you can still run your own node and reconstruct any state you need, which of course you are not going to do yourself, but I'm sure you're aware that companies like Chainalysis do follow these layer 2s, and I'm sure that they would be able to associate every transaction on every account on these networks with wherever the money came from. So it's just, so as long as the data is available, as data availability is guaranteed, you can be sure that someone will be able to help you get audited.
Cool. So I think we are on time. I think this was super instructive. I learned a lot. I hope you guys learned a lot. You're very, very brave that you stayed until now. Yeah, I just want to thank. Oh, you want to say something? No. Okay, good. But cool. So yeah, thanks everybody for coming, and yeah, big round of applause. Yeah, I see you guys. So next CCC, another 437 event. Cheers.